today's Session Daily Update. I'm Chris Carpenter. Before we bring you coverage of today's meeting, we'd like to present some information on how you can learn more about what's happening at the Legislature with the help of the nonpartisan House Public Information Services Office. House Public Information Services produces an online news service called Session Daily. Here's a look at what it has to offer.
Want to stay up to date with what's happening at the Capitol? Then check out Session Daily. The free online publication provides nonpartisan legislative news coverage across a spectrum of issues with a focus on House activity. With Session Daily, you can find out what happened during committee meetings and floor sessions and check out in-depth features on select issues and members. Written by professional journalists, stories also include links to bill information with photos and videos when applicable. Questions about what happened in the past? An archive feature is available. By adding your email address to our listserv, you will receive updates each day during session and when other news warrants throughout the year. For nonpartisan news coverage on the Minnesota House of Representatives, check out Session Daily on our website, www.house.mn/sessiondaily.
House Public Information Services also provides gavel-to-gavel video coverage of hearings, member interviews, press conferences, and other legislative events on our YouTube page. Here's a look.
Follow House Public Information Services on our YouTube channel. We provide nonpartisan coverage that keeps you up to date with what's happening at the Capitol. Check out archived House floor session debates and follow the progress of a bill with committee coverage. And learn more about members of the Minnesota House of Representatives with our video interviews. For nonpartisan coverage of the Minnesota House of Representatives, follow the House Public Information Services YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/MNHouseInfo.
The House Public Information Services Office is located in room 175 of the State Office Building and provides legislative materials and information free to the public. Office hours are weekdays from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and you can call 651-296-2146 to learn more about the Minnesota House of Representatives. We now bring you coverage of today's meeting.
House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to share a part of the day with you. Let's pray. Eternal God, amid all the turmoil and changes of the world, your love is steadfast and your strength never fails. In this time of danger and trouble, especially in the Ukraine, be to us a sure guardian and rock of defense. Guide the leaders of our nations with your wisdom, comfort those in distress, and grant us courage and hope to face the future. We commend to you on this day to your gracious care in keeping all the men and women of our armed forces at home and abroad. Defend them by day and with your heavenly grace. Strengthen them in their trials and temptations. Give them courage to face the perils that surround them, and grant them a sense of your abiding presence wherever they may be. And finally, we lift up before you all who govern this state. May those who hold power understand that it is a trust from you to be used, not for personal glory or profit, but for the service of your people. And grant us grace to live together in unity and peace. And all this we ask in your loving name. Amen.
Amen. The chaplain for today is Reverend Craig Hansen from Our Savior's Lutheran Church, Circle Pines, Minnesota. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will take the roll. Members, please take your conversations off of the House floor into the alcoves or the rotunda. Will the clerk please call the names of the members who have not answered the quorum call yet?
Oh, that's a pain for me to get those. I'll just hand it to you. It's not coming out. Dave, not coming out. Yeah. Albright. Albright present. Backer.
Backer present.
Backer present. Bierman. Bierman present. Davney. Davney.
Dabney present.
Davney present. Franzen.
Are we waiting for Miranda?
Franzen. Grunhagen.
Present.
Grunhagen present. Hausman.
Hausman present.
Hausman present. Keeler.
Keeler present.
Keeler present. Mecklin. Mecklin. Moran.
Present.
Moran present. Pinto. Pinto present. Sandsted.
Present.
Sandsted present. Tice. Tice present. Thompson. Thompson. Speaker Hartman. Present. Speaker Hartman present. Franzen. Franzen. Mecklin. Mecklin. Thompson.
The clerk will close the roll. A quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 92nd session, 2022, 69th day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Monday, February 21st, 2022.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business is online. If there is no objection, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading House File number 1156.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 2875.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 3087.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 3093.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 3175.
Second reading. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The chief clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction of first reading of House Files 3690 through 3784.
First reading, House Files 3690 through 3784. Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Winkler from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Thursday, February 24th, 2022, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills: Senate File number 2774, House File number 2900, and Senate File number 2957. Winkler from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Monday, February 28th, 2022, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills: House File numbers 1315 and 2841, Senate File number 1782, and House File number 2454.
Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 2774. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 2774, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to human services, the first engrossment.
I recognize the member from St. Louis, Representative Schultz, to present the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senate File 2774 is a bill that is a recodification of the Disability Waiver Rate System, DWRS. Last year, the Revisor's Office instructed us to reorganize Minnesota Statute Section 256B.4914, which governs the DWRS material, which determines the service rates for most of the services provided under disability waivers, such as BI, CAC, CADI, and the DD waivers. The primary purpose of the bill is to reorganize the statute without making any policy or rate calculation changes. And this reorganization will result in statutes that are easier to read and to amend. Under current law, the same language is used to describe rates for multiple services, But since the rates are often different, the existing language includes exceptions and qualifications. By recreating the language for each service without any unnecessary exceptions or qualifications, the language is more transparent and easier to amend. Also included in the bill are changes to terminology to make terms more consistent throughout the statute, and changes to make the basic format of the rate calculations consistent. There's also housekeeping changes incorporated into the bill, such as modified employment classification names, updated SOC codes, and updated values for certain component values to match their values as of December 31st, 2021. And I want to thank Danielle Punelli and Liam Moynihan, our House and Senate nonpartisan research staff, for doing the recodification.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 2774.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Any discussion to the bill? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, will those who are voting remotely please vote? Will the clerk please call the names of the members who have not voted yet?
Backer.
Backer votes yes.
Backer, aye. Davney. Davney. Damath.
Davney, aye.
Davney, aye. Damath. Franzen.
Franson, yes.
Franzen, aye. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, aye.
Gruenhagen, aye. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Mecklin. Mecklin. Moran.
Aye.
Moran, aye. Murphy.
Murphy, aye.
Murphy, aye. Thompson.
Thompson, aye.
Thompson, aye. Damath. Damath. Mecklin. Mecklin. Okay.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 1 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 2957. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File Number 2957, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to retirement, the first engrossment.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Bonner, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, the bill before you today, we'll cover that first and then move on to the amendment, but the bill before you today achieves two basic things. First, it extends HF 76, passed off the floor last cycle, to the date of December 31st, 2023. This extension provides additional time for para employees from phased retirement plans or who came out of retirement and stepped up to fill positions on the front lines in hospitals, long-term care facilities, and ambulance services to continue to fill critical staffing shortages. These are individuals returned to the front lines specifically to ensure our loved ones were cared for in their time of greatest need. The original bill and the one before you today acknowledges the hard work and dedication of these folks from rural to urban to suburban, ensuring they could help their communities without impacting their pensions. In addition, this extension provides sufficient time for stakeholders to convene, weigh long-term options, and pass permanent solutions to keep our frontline workers caring for your loved ones. Secondly, the bill clarifies language that inadvertently created a loophole for retired employees returning to duty to make them whole. The bottom line, this bill is about patient care. Through wave after wave during the pandemic, these employees did not waver. They did not give up. They made personal sacrifices, often putting the care of our loved ones before their own families. As staff fell ill and became weary, these seasoned professionals did not hesitate. They jumped in with both feet to fill critical gaps in the front lines. Minnesota is fortunate to have a deep bench of exceptional healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, EMTs, respiratory therapists that are badly needed in the healthcare staff. These workers have vast knowledge in areas like ER, urgent care, triage, and ICU experience. They're highly trained, caring professions, willing and able to continue to do the work. Today, members, it's our turn to show our gratitude for these women and men serving at the bedside, providing critical care, comfort, guidance, and compassion for families and patients. In our time of need, they answered the call. These everyday heroes stepped up in this crisis to serve our communities and our families, and today we ensure that these dedicated professionals can continue to do this work and be made whole. Members, I ask for your support, and I do have an amendment.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bonner moves to amend Senate File Number 2957, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A22-0332.
Representative Bonner.
Actually, I'm going to be withdrawing the A22, or no, sorry. I'm sorry, wrong one. Apologies. The A22-0332 amendment essentially reflects a compromise with the Senate on the final date, which is on line point 4.16, to change that date to 2023. We do have concurrence with the Senate and Senator Kiffmeyer, who is the author in the Senate, as well as all of the stakeholders to make this change. I ask for your support.
Any discussion to the amendment?
I printed the wrong one.
The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can I just ask for clarification on what amendment we are on? I'm not sure the number matches what we're talking about.
Thank you, Representative New Brindley. I think you are correct. The chief will repeat the amendment that we're on.
Bonner amendment to Senate File Number 2957, and it's coded A22-0332.
Any discussion to the amendment? And I'm going to let those who are participating remotely know that I will always try to look at the board to see if you have indicated that you would like to speak. But if you believe that you have and I am not calling on you, feel free to unmute. We don't want to miss anybody in the hybrid procedure. But it looks like nobody wants to talk about this amendment, so we will proceed to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 2957, as amended.
Third reading as amended. Discussion to the bill. Seeing no discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members voting remotely, please vote. Will the chief clerk please call the names of the members who have not yet voted?
I don't like this. Backer.
Backer, aye.
Backer, aye. Davney. Davney, aye. Franzen.
Franson, yes.
Franzen, aye. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, aye.
Gruenhagen, aye. Hausman.
Houseman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Mecklin, excused. Moran. Is he back? Mecklin. Mecklin.
Macklin, aye.
Mecklin, aye. Moran.
Aye.
Moran, aye. O'Neill. O'Neill. Sandsted.
Sandsted, aye.
Sandsted, aye. Thompson.
Thompson, aye.
Thompson, aye. O'Neill. O'Neill.
The clerk will close the roll.
Here it is. You got the amendment? Yep.
There being 130 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 2900. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 2900, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to economic development, the third engrossment.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Frazier, to explain your bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is an honor to carry House File 2900, which is frontline worker pay. We have many of our frontline workers and essential workers that are outside of this room right now. I hope many of my colleagues, DFLers, GOPers will go out and see some of these individuals and talk to them. Many of them are your constituents, our constituents, and they have done great work throughout this pandemic to make sure we've stayed safe and to make sure we've been able to provide it with services that we need on a daily basis. 2 years ago, when the stay-at-home order was initiated, many of us were able to stay home and shelter in place. We were able to limit our potential exposure to COVID-19 and thus able to decrease our chances of contracting the virus. However, hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans continue to go to work in person, risking their own health, their family's health, in order to keep the rest of us and our families safe and healthy, to provide us with the food, products, and services we needed so that we could work remotely and stay home to avoid exposure. These are the Minnesotans who have been on the front lines of this pandemic and who've kept our economy moving. If you had to work in person because of the nature of your job and you worked around people you did not live with, often without access to adequate PPE, if any, you were putting yourself at heightened risk of exposure to COVID-19. This session, this bill has been heard in 6 committees, and members have heard from countless essential workers who have contracted the virus and seen their families and coworkers suffer. Because they didn't have the privilege to stay home, they are at the heart of this bill. This bill seeks to honor our essential workers for their service and their sacrifices. These essential workers include those in healthcare and long-term care, certainly, but they're also those who cared for and taught our kids. They're the meatpacking, grocery, and other food service workers that made sure we had good food and healthy food to eat. They're the manufacturing, retail, warehouse, and delivery workers who allowed us to get the products we needed to stay safe and comfortable in our homes. They're the janitors sanitizing our shared spaces and the public servants working to protect us, and so many more. They're often women and people of color who've historically been underpaid in jobs. We've too often taken for granted, but their work is essential. They are essential. This bill is straightforward. If you worked in person because of the nature of your job in one of the frontline sectors around people outside your household for at least 120 hours during the peacetime emergency, which was from March 15th, 2020 through June 30th, 2021, and you worked in Minnesota. If you made less than the income limits, $85,000 for individuals, $185,000 for joint filers, or $175,000 for individuals, and $350,000 for joint filers for those providing direct COVID-positive patient or resident care. And you receive no more than 20 weeks of unemployment benefits, you would qualify for these resources. The administration will set up an application and applicant support process while ensuring that eligible workers are being reached out to. Once that's completed, the application process will open for 45 days, after which the appropriation will be equally distributed to all eligible applicants up to $1,500 each, which would be exempt from state income taxes. In closing, there is not one of us that hasn't been touched by the work that has been done and continues to be done by our frontline workers. This recognition is long overdue and is only a small gesture to honor those that we have appropriately called heroes. For the workers that are here tonight, you have our gratitude. We are forever indebted to you and the sacrifices you made for our state. We know that we could not and would not be a great state without your hard work, and we are with you. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I do have an amendment.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Frazier moves to amend House Bill number 2900, the third engrossment. The amendment is coded A15.
Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This amendment is straightforward. What it does is it removes the exclusion of physicians, and it now makes them eligible. And let me be clear about that. For physicians, there are physicians that worked day in and day out through the pandemic that were not making much money. They did not have high salaries, but they were sacrificing themselves and their families on a day in and day out basis to take care of our COVID-positive patients, and we want to make sure we include those physicians. This bill also makes some technical amendments at the request of Department of Labor and Industry to make sure there are guardrails around their exempted status for purchasing and procurement. This is important because it will allow Dolly to be agile and move quickly to get these resources out to our essential workers.
Any discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Scott moves to amend House Bill number 2900, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A11.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good to see you up there again. It's good to see everybody's smiling faces. This amendment would require that the applicant's name and the amount of the payment that they receive be made public. And lest you think that's an invasion of somebody's privacy, let me just tell you a little bit about the precedent that's already in place. If you are a public employee, your name and your salary are public information. If you received a PPP loan, your name, the name of your business, the business's address, and the amount you received is public information. And this goes nationally as well. In New York City, after 9/11, and there were families that were given government funds because they had injured or very sick family members that went into the line of fire and went and rescued people in those burning buildings. Their names and the amount were given and made public. Members, this is shining a light on what this bill is attempting to do. It's $1 billion. That's a lot of money, folks. And so we need some transparency, so I would ask for member support. And I would request a roll call, Madam Chair.
Representative Scott requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Representative Scott. We've had some chance to bond and get to know each other over this amendment that you're bringing here, and I have appreciated that, getting to know about your family and getting to tell you a bit about mine. So, but what I will say, Representative Scott, I am and I will continue to work on this to make sure that we get it to a place that you are going to accept it. I did speak with Minkoji, who supported your amendment, and we talked about possible ways that they're going to get me to look at options as to how we can address your concerns. There is some concern around the posting the names and the amounts for these individuals, and I want to work around that. But I can tell you it's still a continuing work in progress, and because we're not totally done yet, it's not on the governor's desk. I think we can take care of that and make sure that it meets the requirements that you're looking for and addresses your concerns. So I would urge a no vote right now because we're working on it, but Representative Scott, I appreciate you bringing it.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Frazier, ditto. I enjoyed chatting with you the other evening on this bill and getting to know a little bit more about your family. I'm so glad to be back in person so we can actually have those conversations in person. And folks, while I appreciate Representative Frazier's sentiments, this is the last stop before this bill does anything. It doesn't look like the Senate is moving a like bill. So I don't know that there's not going to probably be some kind of a conference committee to make this change. This is it. And so I would just still encourage members, this is our last opportunity to add some transparency to this bill, and I would encourage a green vote. Thank you, Madam Chair, or Speaker.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The idea of this bill is to get the dollars to the people, the workers who are deserving, who took care of us and kept things going during the pandemic, not to dissuade them from applying for these funds because their information is going to be made public. Certainly appreciate the desire to have some oversight, but I think there are better mechanisms to do that other than making people's names and information public. There's many reasons to not make this public, especially as it concerns victims of crime or even potential victims of crime if there are folks in our community who now they're sort of on blast that they have that they're receiving these payments. And so would appreciate a no vote, members.
Any further discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Members voting remotely, please vote. Will the clerk please call the names of the members who have not yet voted?
This is a vote on an amendment, not on the bill being introduced.
We got to make that quicker. That's just too slow. Backer.
Backer votes aye.
Backer, aye. Franzen.
Franson, yes.
Franzen, aye. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, aye.
Gruenhagen, aye. Hausman.
Houseman, no.
Hausman, no. Mecklin.
Meckland, aye.
Mecklin, aye. Moran. Moran. Sandsted.
Sandsted, no.
Sandsted, no. Thompson. Thompson. Moran. Moran. Thompson.
The clerk will close the roll.
Thompson, no. Thompson, no.
Thompson, no.
There being 62 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Scott moves to amend House File Number 2900, the third engrossment, as amended. The amendment is coded A17.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And this amendment, I'm hoping will draw some bipartisan support. This amendment would require the legislative auditor, the Office of the Legislative Auditor, to do an audit 1 year from now. And I did speak to the auditor's office. They said that was be when they could get to it. And so I would appreciate a green vote. Again, this is $1 billion we're spending. We need to audit. We need to have an audit of this program. I would encourage a green vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Scott moves to amend her amendment to House File Number 2900, the third engrossment, as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A18.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And this just is a correction so that the amendment applies to the right page and line number and the right section of the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would encourage a green vote as well.
All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. There's another amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hanson moves to amend the Scott amendment as amended to House File Number 2900, the third engrossment, as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A21.
The member from Dakota, Representative Hanson, to your amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The A21 amendment relates to this Audit Commission amendment by Representative Scott. The Legislative Audit Commission has an equal number of senators and representatives, an equal number of Republicans and Democrats. It has been our tradition in this body to oppose earmarking the audits, to oppose putting audits into the statute or into the rider language, but instead leave that discretion to the highly respected Legislative Audit Commission. So what my bill does is, what my amendment, the A21 amendment does, is changes the shall to a may. That provides for the discretion. The Legislative Audit Commission does have a budget. Conducting an audit has cost. And so by changing from shall to may, it provides that ability for the commission and the new legislative auditor, Judy Randall, to make that decision rather than directing them. I'd ask for your support.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Hanson, thank you for coming over and chatting with me about your amendment before we got started today. And I just want to say, members, I talked to Ms. Randall. I asked her, could the legislative auditor take a look at this program? And she said we could do it in a year. And I said that would be perfect timing. That'll give, all the money to be allotted, all those sorts of things. And so she was agreeable to it. And so, again, it's $1 billion. $756,000 of which is going to a nonprofit. I think that we need to make sure that this money is going to who it was meant to go to. And therefore, I would I would ask for a no vote on the Hansen amendment, and I would request a roll call, Madam Chair.
Representative Scott requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hansen, any further discussion?
I don't want to contradict the author, but the commission does provide for the choosing, and we're in that process right now of having members recommend topics for the commission to choose. So we do have a budget. The tradition has been not to earmark audits. By adopting the 821 amendment, it provides that discretion to the commission as well as the new legislative auditor to make that choice.
Seeing no further discussion. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Quam and then Representative New Brindley. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm glad that the author of the amendment brought up that there is a nomination or submission of ideas for audits. We have a process where the legislators will then vote on topics. And I see this is one more way that the legislators vote on an important topic. So I don't see any discongruity with the current process, and let us see if the legislators think that the disbursement of $1 billion is something that might need an audit. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to say very clearly that this amendment to the amendment makes transparency and accountability optional. You probably want to vote no.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Will those voting remotely please vote? Will the clerk please call the names of the members who have not yet voted?
Backer. Backer. Feist. Feist. Franzen.
Backer votes no.
Backer, no. Feist.
Franson?
Franzen.
Franson votes no.
Franzen, no. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, no.
Gruenhagen, no. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Mecklin.
Macklin, no.
Mecklin, no. Moran. Moran. Morrison.
Morrison, aye.
Morrison, aye. Ryer. Ryer, aye. Sandsted.
Sandsted, aye.
Sandsted, aye. Thompson.
Thompson, no. Thompson, no.
Thompson, no. Feist. Feist, aye. Moran. Moran.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 68 ayes and 63 nays, the amendment to the amendment is adopted. On the amendment as amended, discussion. Discussion to the Scott amendment as amended. Representative Scott.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I was going to request a roll call, but now that this is just an option that lacks transparency, we'll be fine with just a voice vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Any further discussion? All those? Oh, Representative Frazier, I'm so sorry.
No, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the amendment to Rep. Scott's amendment. I will say, these are workers, many of them low-wage workers. Many of them have not hesitated to show up day in and day out for us. And I think the mere alluding to the fact that these individuals may try to defraud this system when we've had them waiting for nearly 2 years is problematic. Urge a yes vote.
Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Mortensen moves to amend House File Number 2900, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A13.
The member from Scott, Representative Mortensen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the Stop Vaccine Mandates Amendment. We've all heard about this amendment for the last 6 months. Hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans across the state have been affected by these completely anti-scientific vaccine mandates. Right on the front steps of this building last fall, there were, I don't know, half a dozen rallies for healthcare freedom, with 5,000 to 6,000 people attending each one of them. This is a crucially important amendment. This whole entire bill is about the compensation for frontline workers. And a one-time check is great, but I think preserving their jobs is much more appreciated. So with that, Madam Speaker, I ask for a roll call vote.
Representative Mortensen requests a roll call. There are not 15 hands. The member from Ramsey, Representative Herr.
Madam Speaker, I rise to a point of order.
State your point of order.
Under Rule 3.21, motions and propositions must be germane. This amendment introduces a vaccine requirement, which vaccines are not mentioned in this bill. So therefore, Representative Mortensen's amendment should be ruled out of order.
I've had an opportunity to review the amendment and review the bill, and I find the point of order well taken. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 2900, as amended.
Third reading as amended. Discussion to the bill. The member from Hennepin, Representative Frazier.
We have some. Madam Speaker, I do believe we have some members that would like to speak to.
Yeah, customarily the author goes last, but I wasn't sure if you wanted first and last. That's also, you're also entitled to that.
I will defer to other members, and I will close us out. Thank you.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and for allowing me to speak in support of the legislation in front of us. So this past week, Duluth was hit by a snowstorm that shut down roads, closed offices, and that we are still digging out from. I watched the snowstorm blanket our city from a hospital room at the bedside of my daughter. For 6 days through a snowstorm and staff shortages, my daughter received incredible, compassionate care from a team of care providers, doctors, nurses, nutrition specialists, and housekeepers. In particular, I have a newfound respect for the work of those at the bedside, the nurses, who despite 16-hour shifts, sleeping where they could, and coming back for more, were there through some of the most difficult nights I have experienced as a parent. And I know this is not my experience alone. Nurses have been showing up for the last 2 years as we weathered another kind of storm, putting their own health on the line to care for us. Nurses like Becky, a nurse at St. Luke's in Duluth, who wrote me just last week to say this. Recently, while at work, I met an older gentleman, a retired Marine, in the elevator one evening. I looked at him and pointed to his hat and sincerely thanked him for his service as the elevator doors opened for me to step out. He looked me dead in the eye and said, with sadness and understanding, "Thank you for yours." I smiled, and as the elevator doors closed behind me, I just stood there and cried. Nurses like Kelly, a registered nurse in the medical intensive care unit at Abbott Northwestern, where she has spent the past 2 years caring for critically ill patients. She spends the first half of her shift running between 2 rooms of patients. Her shifts used to be spent assessing and progressing the plan of care and making changes to what her patients needed based on the time she was able to spend with them. Now what her patients needed is based on the time she has available to spend with them. Now most of her shifts are spent putting out fires and keeping her patients from getting worse. Any efforts to make them better quickly feel like a pipe dream. When she clocks out at night, they're asking nurses to stay and help. Having met her 16-hour maximum for the day, she goes home. The next day, a 12-hour shift is more of the same. Patients being put on ventilators left and right, escorting patients to emergency CT scans. The needs never stop, and neither do the nurses. And this is what she says to all of us. We are far enough into this pandemic to face the true reality. There isn't any more help available, but the front line, the only line, still needs support and incentives to keep going. We need those in positions of power to see our humanity, recognize our limits, and fill our cups so we can keep pouring from them. Today we can deliver for nurses like Becky, Kelly, and the ones that took care of my daughter. We can provide more than just words of thanks. Today we can vote yes on House File 2900 to provide frontline worker pay and support for the workers who have supported all of us. Let's get this done for workers who are counting on us now. Vote yes.
The member from Dakota, Representative Berg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, as a frontline worker myself, I rise in support of House File 2900. Flight attendants are aviation's first responders, and we quickly became frontline workers during a global pandemic. Before anyone really understood the magnitude of what we were facing with COVID-19, we operated as business as usual. We continued all meal and beverage services, we didn't wear masks or gloves, and our flights were still full. As the world became more informed, safety measures were implemented, but by the very nature of the job, we were still at considerable risk. We found ourselves having to make the agonizing decision between going to work and being exposed to exponentially great risk, or take the unpaid leave the airlines were offering and the crushing financial loss that would mean. As I flew during those initial months of the pandemic, I learned that my passengers were often essential workers themselves. They were doctors and nurses who were traveling to help at hospitals and clinics that needed more staff. They were construction workers traveling across the country to build additions to hospitals to increase the capacity to care for the rising number of COVID patients. And they were government workers coming together to work on solutions. Whether it is healthcare workers, nursing home workers, meatpacking and grocery workers, state employees, cleaning workers, or flight crews, many of whom are in the gallery or rotunda today, our frontline workers have suffered. While they have worked tirelessly to meet the needs of all of us, many have been separated for long periods of time from their families to mitigate risk of exposure. Many have lost wages when they have contracted COVID or quarantined because of exposure. We know that some of our workers have had to go to work without the personal protection equipment they needed. Nurses have had to reuse masks for up to a week at a time. They have had to use personal time or vacation hours to supplement their income when they have had to quarantine. Some childcare workers were sent to multiple different locations and were always worried about bringing the virus back to family members from each new child center. As we continue to emerge from the worst of the pandemic and industry begins to become profitable again, many workers have yet to see the same financial recuperation. After all that we have asked of our frontline workers to protect us, to provide for our basic needs, to care for us and our loved ones, we have before us an opportunity to give back. This bill offers at least a little relief, and it signals to them that we see their humanity, that their sacrifices will not go unnoticed, that they will not be left behind. While what we have asked of our frontline workers can never fully be repaid, this is our chance to show them our support. I want to sincerely thank the author of this bill, Representative Frazier, and the entire Frontline Worker Working Group for their dedication to ensure this bill would be brought to the floor. But most of all, I want to send my heartfelt gratitude to all of the workers whose sacrifices have made it possible for us to weather this storm. Members, I look forward to unanimous support for HF 2900. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I really want to thank Representative Frazier and all the members who served on the Frontline Worker Pay Working Group to figure out this bill. I'm grateful that we can do more to show our appreciation beyond simply calling these workers heroes. I also want to thank Representative Frazier from the bottom of my heart for his amendment to include physicians in this measure. I've been hearing from many residents, interns, and fellows in my district who were left out of the initial bill, and they told me about a phenomenon in medicine called a moral injury. A moral injury occurs when someone must perpetuate, bear witness, or fail to prevent an act that transgresses our deeply held moral beliefs. It is similar to PTSD in the way that it affects your mental health. The frontline medical staff in my community have called the past year a moral injury. They have witnessed pain and death. They've worked countless hours. They put their lives on the line to protect our own. And I want to take some time today to share some stories of residents and fellows I've been talking to give you a sense of what they've experienced during this pandemic and why they deserve a green vote on House File 2900. My constituent Tess told me this story. I was in my third year of my internal medicine and pediatrics residency training when COVID-19 hit our community. I was actually in the medical ICU at the time of Minnesota's first COVID admissions. My residency experience was definitely impacted by COVID due to changes in rotation schedules and additional coverage backup time.
Members, please take your conversations off the House floor into the alcoves or into the rotunda.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To continue Tess's story.
Members, please take your conversations off of the House floor into the alcoves or into the rotunda. Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate it. I'm going to go back to Tess's story where she said, we were all asked to provide extra coverage in the ICU during surges, and I volunteered to work outside of my coverage time in the ICU in place of elective rotation time. I did this before vaccines were available and for no extra compensation. At that time, my salary was less than $15 an hour. I also heard from Rob, who is a pediatrics resident, who said that residents are trainee doctors who work long hours, often 60 to 80 hours weekly, and have no power to advocate for better working conditions, even without a pandemic. My pediatric resident colleagues and I have taken care of kids with COVID and complications from COVID for the past 2 years, and it's been tremendously challenging in many ways. Perhaps most of all, we've had increased time being called away from high-quality learning opportunities and already limited rest to work in our hospital wards, ICUs, and emergency departments, which are overflowing and understaffed. Paul, another resident and constituent of 68, told me this story, which means a lot to me as someone who thinks about planning for my future family. While caring for newborn babies in our neonatal intensive care unit, I was often tasked with conveying information to parents over the phone who were unable to visit their child because they tested positive for COVID-19. Navigating the moral dilemma of separating a mother from her baby in order to provide protection for both was incredibly difficult. And then finally, I'd like to share Rita's words. My resident and fellow colleagues and I are just humans. Humans with families at home, humans with basic needs like sleep, and some of us are humans with chronic medical conditions that put us at above average risk from complications of COVID. We have given our time because we care about our community and our colleagues, not because we expected additional compensation for every hour that we worked. Members, Madam Speaker, I also think about one healthcare worker during the pandemic whose name I do not know. I think about the nurse or CNA or nursing home worker who stayed with my grandmother and said her last rites for her when she died of COVID. I think about the moral injury this worker has and how I'll never be able to say thank you or how sorry I am for this moral injury. I can't tell this hero how meaningful they are to me and how often I think about them, but I can vote green today. I urge you to join me.
The member, Representative Lucero, please tell me your county. Right, the member from Wright, Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. How can you forget it is the best county in the entire state of Minnesota?
My almost seatmate, how could I forget? Representative Lucero.
Yes, would have been, yes. Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. And I appreciate the words that we've been hearing. Thanking those that have been on the front lines because they have indeed put an incredible sacrifice for several years now, helping and ensuring all of us in Minnesota are as protected and healthy as we can be. But, Madam Speaker, I am very concerned about the cost of this bill. So it exceeds $1 billion that I can see. Gesundheit. I have to collect my thoughts, Madam Speaker. I have an article here from Minetest. And it says that it was revealed that between the multiple programs from the federal government, that a total $73 billion has come to the state of Minnesota. And Madam Speaker, we know, because I know each and every one of us is probably receiving emails that our hardworking constituents are getting crushed with price increases, getting crushed with inflation. We've seen for 3 months in a row now that price increases are devastatingly high, 40-year high, decades high. Now, why is this happening, Madam Speaker? Why is inflation skyrocketing? Well, the answer is simple. Because of the big federal government money tree in the sky that the Democrat majority believes you can just continue to push money out, throw it into the economy, and there are no consequences. Well, the fact is, Madam Speaker, we are seeing the consequences right now. And Madam Speaker, this bill before us contributes to that problem. Government cannot defy the laws of financial physics. When you pump more money into the economy from printing it and borrowing it from foreign nations, there is more money in circulation and it dilutes the dollar, increasing prices. So, Madam Speaker, I encourage a red vote on this bill, not because our frontline workers aren't important, not because of the incredible sacrifice that they have given to us in Minnesota, but because Democrats seek to continue to make worse the price increases seen at the gas pump, seen in housing prices, seen in energy prices, seen in the food prices across Minnesota. You cannot continue to just throw money out there and expect there won't be consequences. Vote red, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Bolden.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to Representative Frazier for all your work on this bill. I'd like us to think back to the spring of 2020. There was so much we know now that we didn't know back then. We didn't know all we know about ways to keep each other safe, like masking and distancing. We didn't have rapid tests. We didn't have vaccines. We didn't know all we know about the treatment, progression, and potential effects of COVID-19. Yet with all that uncertainty and danger, hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans left the safety of their homes and went to work to be sure that our state kept moving forward. They risked their health and safety and that of their families in an unprecedented global pandemic. They took care of our loved ones in hospitals and long-term care facilities. They taught our children. They provided early learning and care to our little ones. They delivered our meals and stocked grocery shelves. They cleaned and sanitized in efforts to keep us safe. All of these individuals deserve recognition and compensation.
I think in particular of my nursing colleagues who have experienced more death, grief, and moral injury in the last 2 years than they probably ever could have imagined. It's hard to adequately describe how difficult the pandemic has been and continues to be for nurses and those on health care. But suffice it to say they've gone above and beyond day after day for nearly 2 years. They deserve our support. All the frontline workers who put themselves in harm's way to ensure our state could keep going deserve our support. This bill is not all that they deserve, but it is overdue and it's important, and I urge members to vote yes. Thank you.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Munson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and it's been an interesting conversation about this bill. It's a lot of people getting paid in this bill with taxpayer money. I just got a phone call from my plumber who's working on my house and asked me what I was doing. I said, I'm sitting on the House floor about to vote on the frontline worker bill. And he said, do I get paid? I said, well, let me look in here. Let's see, I'll see if you're on the list. Doesn't say plumbers, but it does say retail, including sales, fulfillment, distribution, and delivery. And he said, well, I've been walking in all these houses during COVID too. I asked him, were you employed for at least 3 weeks during COVID? And of course he was, he works full time. So I'm not really clear if he's gonna get paid or not. But it sure covers a lot of people and excludes a lot of people too, especially people who lost their job or were told that they could not work during COVID, that the governor closed down the businesses. They're not paid in this bill. Would Representative Berg yield for a question?
She will. Representative Munson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Berg, you talked about how you're a flight attendant and that you'll be compensated. Are you planning on voting on this bill, or are you going to recuse yourself for the vote on this bill?
Thank you for the question.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Just kidding.
Representative Winkler, for what purpose do you rise?
Madam Speaker, personalities are not allowed in debate, and this specific question is out of order.
Representative Munson, your question is out of order.
I'm sorry to hear that, Madam Speaker. I was wondering, and most of us have day jobs, and I'm wondering how many of the people in the Minnesota House of Representatives are going to receive checks for the bill that they're voting on passing today, and if there's a conflict of interest. So I guess I won't get an answer to that question, but I'm wondering how many people here have jobs in retail or have jobs in distribution or sales or maintenance, in many of the other job categories that are listed here, and how we would find those conflicts out. So I guess we'll just have to wonder, and the voters can wonder as well. So thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll be voting no.
The member from Sibley, Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Frazier yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Gruenhagen.
Well, Representative Frazier, the question is, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, and it was kind of alluded to, there's no Senate companion, there's no agreement with the Senate on this bill. So to me, what is your path for this bill if we have nothing from the Senate? And I know we have quite a few months of negotiations and they were unable to come to a compromise. So it seems a little bit like an exercise in futility until we can get the Senate in a place of compromise. What's your response to that, Representative Frazier?
Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Gruenhagen, thank you for the question. I don't think it's ever an exercise in futility when you are showing Minnesotans, our workers, our essential workers, that we care about them, that we see them, we support them, and we want to honor them. That's what this bill plans to do. I can't speak from the Senate. I'm not in the Senate. I'm in the House because I want to be in the House. I like the work we do here, but I appreciate your question.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thanks for your response, Representative Frazier. And I understand your motivation in that particular area. But it just seems like we should have some type of agreement with the Senate so we can actually do something rather than just go through the antics. And I know your motivation and your heart is good, but it does seem awful frustrating at this point when we don't have any type of agreement with the Senate, and the result is there's not going to be nothing at the governor's desk. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Thank you, Representative Frazier, for really working hard on this bill. Madam Speaker and members, we made a commitment that we are going to stand up for those who put their lives at risk. Let me repeat that again. When we were all working from home, there are those individuals who went to work for all of us. Let me start with this. This bill is the moral thing to do. This bill is the right thing to do. This bill is an overdue bill for the frontline workers during the past 2 years who put their lives at risk. I can speak of many people who have done great things. I'm reminded of a nurse who came to us, and she testified on the select committee. She was a frontline worker. She was taking care of those who contracted COVID-19. Unfortunately, she got ill with COVID-19. She brought it home. She brought it home to her family, and guess what? Because she risked her life and she risked the life of her family, her father contracted COVID-19. She could not be with him. He was in the hospital. The only opportunity that she got was to see him from an iPad as he took his last breath. Members, Hawaii, who put her life at risk, the life of her family at risk, eventually lost her dad. This small amount of thank you that we are sending to them will never bring back her dad. It will never give her the opportunity that she lost when she got sick. We don't know what the long circumstances will be for those who contracted COVID-19. For the past few months, I've spent a lot of time with my dad who's been sick in the hospital. The nursing assistants, the medical assistants, the nurses who cared for him. As we are sitting there, for them to take the circle of coming in and out and seeing how they are exhausted from providing the services that they're doing, we need to appreciate that. The frontline worker, the janitor who cleans the hospitals and many places that we see, they're not invisible. They took the risk to clean for us so we can have a healthy space to be in. Members, the grocery worker who took the risk of helping us put food at the table, they risked their lives for all of us. Members, this is something that we should have done a long time ago. When they came to us, you know what they said? They said, do not forget about us. I still remember that. Do not forget about us. The conditions that were laid through the federal program, the work we did last year and this year. This is a moment to stand up for those who stand up for us. This is a moment to stand for our frontline workers, our essential workers, the heroes who look different from one another. That respect, dignity, and ensuring that we are there for them when they need us, they were there for us when we needed them. This is a simple ask. It's never a big check that we're sending them. It's a small amount of thank you. We cannot repay you for what you've done for us. With that, I urge you, all of us today, to send that message that we care about them. I ask you to vote green and send that strong message that we are all in this together when we had COVID-19, and we are all in this together as we vote for this bill. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Thank you so much, Representative Fraser, for bringing this important bill forward.
The member from Wright, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Let me take you back to December of 2019. Now, that was before the pandemic had started that we knew of. My daughter, Olivia, just passed her boards for RTR. Anyone in healthcare knows what RTR is, but very few of us are in healthcare, so that's a radiologist technician. And she started right after that as a CAT scan technician at Methodist Hospital. And she moved in with me in December to save a little bit of money. And she'd come home from work and she'd say, "Mom, something is happening." Because she's scanning people, right? So she's seeing lungs. And she says, we don't know what's going on. December, January, coming home again. She says, there's this weird thing that's happening and their lungs are filling up. It kind of looks like pneumonia, but it's not really pneumonia. We don't know what it is. She was seeing it at Methodist Hospital, December, January, February. By February, we knew what it was. Now, she's 25 now. She was young when this whole thing started. She was right out of school, just had taken her boards, and she was face to face with something that none of us knew exactly what that meant. They didn't know. They knew it was bad. They knew they were seeing a lot of elderly people and a lot of people that were rather large, a little bit obese people, because it really hit them hard at the beginning. The other thing that happened is she didn't have enough PPE. And I remember putting out on my Facebook page a call for help because she didn't have it and her coworkers didn't have it. And all of a sudden, there were people at my door with boxes of N95s. I couldn't believe it. They had them stored in this place and that place, and a farmer brought some, and a manufacturing facility brought some, and I brought them to her. And another guy was able to get some that were kind of like N95s, but they were from China. And I remember he handed me a box and he said, "This is for your daughter and her coworkers." And then he handed me a black mask. Remember when we first started doing all of those way back then in March, April, May? And it was an athletic one so I could breathe through it because I have asthma and it's really hard for me to breathe with those things on. And he said, "This is just for you." This is what she's gone through. And you know what? She has worked double shifts. She has worked weekends because she was, right, the new one on the block, so she had to work everything. And she worked without enough PPE. She worked so many hours, I can't even tell you. Thankfully, things are a little bit slower. Not a whole lot, though. I remember she, just a few weeks ago, she said, "Mom, we're boarding people in the ER." And I said, "That sounds horrible." And that's what they were doing, just to try to take care of the people that came in the door. You know what I really want to do, members, is I want to reward and support those that really were on the front lines and those that worked in the trenches like my daughter and her coworkers and the nurses there and the doctors and the other techs. I really do. But I'm wondering if the author, if Representative Fraser would yield for a question, because I have a question about this bill, if he would yield.
He will yield. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Oh, good. I can see you now as you stand up. That's awesome. Sometimes we can't see someone across the center here. Representative Fraser, how many weeks out of the 67 weeks does someone have to work to be eligible for this program?
Representative Fraser.
Thank you, Representative O'Neill. Good to see you as well. And glad to hear your daughter has gone through this pandemic unscathed. I really appreciate to hear that. 120 days is the amount of time, at the minimum amount of time, one would have to work to qualify for these resources.
Representative O'Neill.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Representative Fraser.
120 hours, Representative O'Neill.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, I was confused for a moment. Thank you for correcting yourself. So 120 hours, which is the equivalent, members, of 3 weeks, working 3 weeks out of 67 weeks. Now, listen, I want to reward people and support people and encourage people and thank people more than anybody in this room, because you know what? I know a whole bunch of people, including my very own daughter, that put her life at risk to take care of everybody else. And she did it without PPE. She did it without N95 masks. They were reusing gowns. They were doing everything they could to take care of patients coming in at a record pace. I absolutely want to support them. My concern with this bill is that you only needed to have worked 3 weeks out of the entire pandemic that is still going on. 3 weeks. We absolutely need to support people, but we need to support the people that worked during the pandemic. 3 weeks just isn't enough. And now we've done that. We've made that so low, made the bar so low that close to 800,000 people will get this check, which is why it's $1 billion and it's a very small check. You know, I love math, but that math just doesn't work. I want to reward and support and encourage and say good job to my daughter, to her coworkers, to the people at Methodist Hospital and Mercy Hospital and Buffalo Hospital, and everybody else that worked through the pandemic. Didn't work 3 weeks, but worked through the pandemic. So I would encourage you to really think about this. This bill doesn't quite cut the mustard for me. And listen, I want to reward those that worked, but that's the key word, that they worked through the pandemic. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members.
The member from Candy, Ojai, Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's good to see you and everyone here today. I just wanted to speak for a moment. When I hear the floor speeches on here, there was just enough of something that I heard that I need to make mention of. The purpose of us speaking on the floor is because words mean things, and if words mean things, then we have to be cognizant of what we say. And as we move forward with this bill, when I hear, while all of us stayed home, they were out there working. I can tell you, I didn't stay home in the last 2 years. I can tell you there's a lot of people that were considered non-essential workers who didn't stay home. And there's a lot of people with this. And my concern all along has been is through this pandemic, we've been labeling the value of people and then associating a dollar amount with that, or legislation that we passed. You know, I don't have a comprehensive list. I wasn't planning on speaking to this point today, but I just started thinking of some people. We had Minnesota National Guardsmen over in the Middle East for the past year. They aren't getting any sort of bonus off of this. They worked every day to defend our security. There were people, one of the things that really bothered me is when I would have someone call me and say, I'm not considered frontline, I'm not considered essential, so they shut me down. They aren't included on this. One of the things that we need to remember, here in the legislature and the federal government, it seems like more and more we make decisions on spending money on kind of a term that's used now, virtue signaling. We want to show people that we care. How do we show people we care? We show we care by sending them money. There was an article in Minetest a week or so ago that said Minnesota, in total dollars from the federal government, has received $73 billion. And then I know at the state level, I don't know the total amount, but we approved in this legislature even more spending under the guise of COVID. Some of it very much warranted, some of it along these lines of what I'm saying. We want to show you that we care, so we're going to send money into this place or some other place. Members, this bill is $1 billion of other people's money. This isn't our money. This is the taxpayers' dollars that we're spending here right now. $1 billion, and we're signaling out I'm so thankful for the people that were willing to work during these difficult times. I can go on and on for all the people that I saw do some incredible things. And I think a lot of stories are going to come out of this. But we're spending another $1 billion after multiple rounds of federal government sending people. I have in agriculture, I had the banker in Princeburg said there's more money in the bank than he's ever seen before because of all the money that is coming in to different people's checking and savings accounts off of this. Now, I'm not saying some of this wasn't important, but here we are once again. We want to be able to say, and I've heard these speeches time and time again, to where there's people out there that are deserving of this. Absolutely. There's people that we need to get this to, because while we were sitting at home, they were out there working. There's a lot of people out there working. $1 billion of other people's money that we're so casually going to give to a list of people, which automatically excludes other people as soon as we do this. I don't think we need to spend the money at all. But if we're going to spend the money, we better be really careful on who we are deciding who it's going to go to and who it's not going to go to. That's why I supported Representative Scott's amendments. This was not unrealistic to say, let's make sure the money goes to where it's supposed to go. We don't do that. We've spent $73 billion, and I've been telling people back in my district, I bet you we don't know where 90% of it went, or if it actually went to where it was supposed to go. I'm sure some of it did, but I'm also sure that some of it didn't. Members, I think this bill is premature. I know it is with good intent by many people. I think with other people it's the intent to say, you know, we want to prove how much we like you, so here's a check. But I just think this is inappropriate, and I ask members to vote no on this bill. Thank you.
The member from Wright, Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise to oppose the bill. You ever hear the saying, when you paint with a broad brush? I've been very careful in the words I use in my life. Try not to paint with a broad brush. When I talk about my fellow Democrats, I don't paint with a broad brush. When people want to talk about the Irish, I don't paint with a broad brush. We don't all have design rows that go like this. If you remember, Jesse Ventura said that. So unfortunately, you guys painted with a broad brush and you got sloppy. This will not become a bill. Your good intentions, perhaps, is not going anywhere in the Senate, and you wanted to paint with a broad brush, to the point where you're giving someone that worked only 3 weeks $1,500. If you recall, the governor said it'll take 2 weeks to slow the spread. Well, if that was the case, I probably would agree with you. Let's pay someone 3 weeks worth of work. Folks have spent almost 2 years, and you want to give someone who only worked 2 weeks a check. God only knows why that person left after 2 weeks. But they left. They didn't stay at the post. They didn't stick with it to end this pandemic. And you want to pay them $115, That's painting with a broad brush. It's egregious. And it's not fair to the people who worked very hard, including some of you on the other side that had passionate speeches, that worked in the trenches for 80 hours, risking their lives. You just couldn't resist, could you? We could have passed this bill last year, $250 million to the people that are the front line workers, not, food services, fulfillment, distribution, delivery, building service, maintenance, janitorial. They all did great work. But the average Joe on the street does not think that they are frontline workers. And thanks be to God, they got paid for the job. You just couldn't resist. Now it's going nowhere. We had an opportunity to get money to the people of the frontline workers, but you had to throw $1 billion in there. You couldn't resist. Pretty sloppy. That's what happens when you paint with a broad brush. Anybody paint their homes, interior, their homes, rooms? You know what happens when you paint with a broad brush? Sloppy. Marks everywhere. You have to go in and clean it up. Guess what, majority? The Senate is cleaning up your sloppy work, your broad brush work. It's unfortunate, it really is, that we could have really done something good and get the money to the frontline workers because we care. Today in the news, they reported, I was listening to the news, I wrote it down. Oh, here it is. Yeah. I think it was one of the nurses and saying about this bill, to honor their sacrifices for their work. Well, by including everybody and their mother, You didn't honor their sacrifices, did you? Those who are frontline workers. You can say you did, but it's not going anywhere because the Senate's going to clean it up for you. They're sticking within that $250 million. It's a shame. We all would like to support this, but not for $1 billion, including people who weren't on the front lines in the first place. So you missed your opportunity, Majority Leader. If this was under your guise, your leadership, you missed it. And then I do have a question for the author.
He will yield. Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker, my apologies. I painted with a broad brush there, I'm sorry. So, Representative Frazier, I have enjoyed you in committee. We're on committees together, although we don't see each other. You know, we're on a Zoom call, and now we're distance. We're more than 6 feet, so it's just very good to see you. He's articulate, he's bright, and he's very, very well spoken, so I'm jealous. So, but under your bill, under 430, it says something about the 15 days of the applicant, and the employer must find someone. So let's just say there's an employer that had an employee that worked for 2 weeks and left for we know what reason. Under your bill, that'll penalize the employer $1,000 if they can't locate and find that individual. Well, people move about this country and state quite a bit fast, especially after 2 weeks. Do you think that that's a very fair fine to an employer who stayed open during the pandemic, who paid his employees? Some of them got hazard pay. Doesn't that seem a little egregious and onerous to fine them $1,000 after they're finally lifting themselves out of recovery, simply because they can't find an employee who worked there for 2 weeks?
Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative McDonald. And I appreciate all those compliments about me being articulate and well-spoken and all those things. My mother would appreciate you saying those things. And I also have 3 degrees to show that I am articulate and well-spoken. Representative McDonald, I think we had this discussion in committee, and we had a representative from the Department of Labor and Industry discuss how that works. Most of these, it is very rare that they use that $1,000 fine. And in fact, Dolly will design the material that goes out to those individuals, and they only have to give that notice to the workers that are currently employed with them. They don't have to find workers that are no longer employed with them. We have other outreach mechanisms for that. So I am not concerned at all about any employer being punished by this. And just one more thing. Many of the comments that were made and that have been made, I want to apologize to the workers that are up in the gallery, because many of you are those workers that were in those meatpacking places. COVID didn't care if they worked 1 hour or 20 seconds or 20 minutes. There was no threshold for that. Many of these workers contracted the virus and they have never been able to go back to work. Some of them are wheelchair bound. So when we have these comments about who's deserving and not, these workers are absolutely deserving. And that's what this bill is about.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Frazier, I never used the word deserving. Okay? I think we need to be careful not to put words in people's mouths. I never said they were deserving. I said perhaps those who worked only 2 weeks maybe didn't earn it, but not deserving. Folks that worked in the meatpacking plant, certainly. But if you paint with such a broad brush, like you have with this bill, then you truly didn't hit the mark with the frontline workers, who we all know who's the frontline workers. Not the meatpacking plant, not the manufacturing, not the retail worker. They all did great work, but they weren't in the hospitals on the front line. And I think that's where the Senate bill, thanks be to God, will probably be passed and hopefully come into law. Madam Speaker, thank you.
The member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, we have before us a bill that is taking taxpayer money and turning it into legislative charity. We went through this COVID thing that happened over the last couple of years. Last year, the emergency was officially ended. And I remember bringing the first resolution to this body to end the governor's peacetime emergency on April 14th of 2020. Since then, we've seen the Democrats in this body and in this state work to keep Minnesotans shackled down in their basement and become more and more dependent on government, scaring them with this COVID pandemic. Instead of building resiliency in people and encouraging people to get back to their normal life, they threw them on masks, they pushed them in the basement, paid them to work remotely, Zoom everything in life, and throw out the pursuit of work that's inherent in every person as they develop. I don't know where government got the idea that we were a charitable organization with other people's money. Representative Miller, you're right. This is other people's money that bill authors in this body want to bring forward and decide who should get it based on their value of people. What about the other people? What about the people that are paying the bill for this money? This is $1 billion of taxpayer money in front of us, members. I am just very disappointed. Madam Speaker, I'm wondering if Representative Frazier would yield.
He will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Frazier, I find the construct of this bill very interesting. I don't know if I've seen another charity bill like this. There's certainly been a lot of charity bills that have come before this body. I don't remember a $1 billion one. This is $1 billion of other people's money. But you've got an application period in the bill. If you want to get into the government corn pile, apply to the Commissioner of Revenue, or 45 days ahead of time. Commissioner of Labor and Industry, 45 days ahead of time, and you're in, up to $1,500. So they're going to take the $1 billion, well, minus, there's several $1 million that the government is going to excise from this $1 billion in order to pay themselves so that they can benefit. But you take the $1 billion and divvy it up amongst everybody who applies. That's how I understand the bill's written. Just divvy it up, it's like spoils. But then the interesting part, Representative Frazier, on page 4 of the bill, if it's not all spent, you go to the painstaking effort of having a round 2. If you didn't apply in that 45 days and there's money left, guess what? You can come in again. It's like the government's shaking the tree again. Lines 411 through 16 of the bill, Representative Frazier, how is this going to work? Tell us how paragraph C there is going to work. Is the government going to come out and knock on their door and say, you didn't get any money, we're here to deliver it, why aren't you taking money? This is like we're forcing the people's money out to people who don't apply for it. I'm really confused about this construct. That would be my question. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Drazkowski. There is a function, an outreach function in the bill. It's outlined. Dolly will do some outreach. Employers will do some outreach. That same function will be in place if there's a second round.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Frazier. Would Representative Frazier yield again, Madam Speaker?
He will. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Representative Frazier, I read that part of the bill too. How long is this shaking the money tree section going to be open? It doesn't say in the bill. Are they going to be doing this for 10 years until they spend all the people's money?
Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Drazkowski. It only allows for one other round. After that round, it would be complete as the bill allows.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the author yield again, Madam Speaker?
He will. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Representative Frazier, it says it will go on, this round 2, the money tree shaking event will happen until all the money's spent. What if the money isn't spent? How long does that round go on? How long will the Department of Labor and Industry be shaking the tree?
Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the question, Representative Zukowski. The intent is that the round will last is the same as the first round. As you'll notice, it doesn't require a third round. Things will be over after that second round.
Representative Trzaskowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Frazier. Well, it doesn't say in the bill, Madam Speaker, Representative Frazier, it doesn't say in the bill. Ostensibly, this agency could be trying to give out other people's money for a long time. We might get people moving to Minnesota to get their $1,500, Madam Speaker. Maybe this is the Democrats' new approach to bringing people into our states since they've chased them all away with the taxation, regulation, and COVID fear that they brought forward. I reviewed, Madam Speaker, at least somewhat, just a list of some of the payments that we have made, both federally and state, over this 2-year period. There was a special unemployment opportunity for people that liberalized our unemployment system to the point it drained and placed into deficit by billions of dollars our unemployment system in Minnesota. Now, some will argue, well, that was a public purpose, but I'll tell you, that was a lot of money. That was billions of dollars that was spent with action from this body of other people's money. The federal PPP program went to many businesses throughout the state. Billions of dollars throughout the country and throughout the state. Business payments, state money. We had a business round of state payments that we put out there as we are paying people again from here with other people's money. There were the federal checks, the federal walking around money. There were thousands of dollars at $1,500 at a time, $1,200. I just looked in the mailbox and there's a check. $1,200. I didn't have to work for it. Madam Speaker, that's not how people are wired. We're trying to redesign through this behavior and groom people to accept the idea that government is going to pay them. And that's what we're doing in this bill. There were restaurant and hotel payments that we passed here in the Minnesota House. Counties and cities got many, many, many dollars of other people's money, legitimized through the idea that they had a hard time through COVID, like everybody else. The people outside saying they had a hard time through COVID and they want the money they want other people's money. Rent help. We had a self-inflicted wound that government inflicted upon the renter-landlord relationship in this state and messed it all up. So we're going to take other people's money to fix the problem. Members, we are grooming people for socialism. That's what's going on with this behavior. Instead of that, we need to build resilience in people, bring them back to work again, restore the dignity that has been stripped from them by this behavior over the last couple of years. Madam Speaker, government wasn't designed to be a charitable organization. But that's the behavior that we've seen here. That's the behavior in this bill to make people dependent on government. Madam Speaker, I own a business in this state. I have employees in this state, and they aren't asking for this money. I have friends I've asked about this bill that work in this state. They're in these job categories that Representative Frazier outlines in the bill. They're not asking for money. They want us instead to take these huge piles of money, other people's money that are accumulating here, and stop taking them from the people of Minnesota. The hardworking people that toil in order to move their business and their future and their family forward. They simply want to be left alone and have the ability to succeed on their own. Instead, we're inserting government and making them dependent. This is a sad day for Minnesota, Madam Speaker. This is not the way our founders envisioned their future. I think about the first Minnesota that went to Pennsylvania. And Representative Erdahl tells me 82% of them didn't come back. And they knew many of them weren't going to come back, Madam Speaker. And guess what? They went anyway. And here we are with a disease that a small 0.3% of the people are going to succumb to, or whatever that amount is. Children, they don't even have they have a better chance of getting run over by the school bus than they do of dying from COVID. In the first Minnesota, the people that came before us and the courage that they had, where is it today, Madam Speaker? Where is the courage in this state? Where is the courage in this body to encourage others to have courage in this state? Because I am not seeing it in this behavior of this body. Madam Speaker, we need to head a different direction. This is heading us down a road that is not building resilience in our people, in our state. This is not making us a stronger people. This is not making us a more prosperous people. It's making us a poorer people. It's making us a weaker people, and we are going in the wrong direction. Members, I encourage you to vote no. Let's head in a different direction, and let's find resiliency again. Let's make Minnesota strong again. And let's defeat this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Isanti, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and members. Appreciate the efforts to bring a bill like this forward, but I wasn't actually planning to speak. But just as I listened to the speeches in here, which sounded an awful lot like election speeches, and I assume we're probably going to see a lot of them in election clips on social media, re-election clips, it dawns on me that this bill means nothing. And I want to tell the people at home, don't get your hopes up. Because the Democrats aren't delivering anything for you today. Nothing. Zero. And what I mean by that is in the last session of this legislature, the majority body, or the majority party in this body, made an agreement with the Senate and with the governor that we were going to do $250 million of frontline worker pay. This is the bill. But this is $1 billion. I learned very early in my legislative career that legislating is a team sport. You can't get anything done by yourself. And that if there's one thing that you need to keep around here to be part of a team, it's your word. And when you make an agreement and when you make a deal, you should live up to that. Not try to renegotiate it without renegotiating it, just bringing a bill to the floor that has no chance of passing and becoming law. Just because you want to move the goalpost. If you want to help people, live up to the agreement you already made. Pass that first. Then come back and say, you know what? We don't think that's enough. We think we should do more. And try to get them more. But what you're doing right now is you're risking the money you already agreed to. Because if you stay on the path you're on, nothing's going to happen. And these people who need that money aren't going to get any. And all of the promises that you're making to Minnesotans are worthless, just like this bill. Worthless. And today we're learning that worthless is exactly what your word is worth, because you're breaking the deal that you made last year. So stand up and give your re-election speeches. Stand up and make empty promises to Minnesotans. But I assure you, the eyes are on you this year. And I've noticed that you seem to be starting to notice that that's the case. Because you're not talking about defunding police like you were last year. You're starting to sound like Republicans. But I assure you that Minnesotans are watching, and they will be watching this session. And this is your opportunity to not play, I'll trade you this for that, or I'll hold this hostage to get that. This is your opportunity to actually do what you said you were going to do. You made a deal with the Senate and with the governor that you were going to pass $250 million of frontline worker bonus money. And here we are with a bill that's 4 times that, with no agreement from anyone. So the message to those at home is don't get your hopes up. You're not going to get this money. Because Democrats in the Minnesota House have broken their word. They've broken their promise, and they're not even trying to get this money to you. What they're trying to do is fool you so they can win an election. They're trying to fool you that they care about you. But they can't even deliver on the $250 million that was agreed to last year. They're breaking their promise on that. And you know who loses? You do. And ultimately in the next election, Democrats in the Minnesota House will lose as well. Because Minnesotans are watching. Thank you.
The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I had the privilege of serving on the frontline worker group this summer, and I want to start by just pointing out that there are several things in the bill that we did agree on, and I think those things are important. They're probably relatively minor points in the bill, but important nonetheless that there is some matter of agreement. One, the application process laid out in the bill is based on a presentation we heard from another state. While there's very little detail in the language, the concept was certainly agreed upon. We all believed that the application period should be a relatively short, defined period of time. That is laid out in the bill. We all agreed that the payments should not affect other benefits that folks are receiving. We certainly did not want these payments to be taxable, and we did not want folks to lose other benefits as a result of receiving this payment. This payment really should be a reward as a frontline worker during the pandemic, and that would have defeated that purpose. And I also want to say thank you to Representative Frazier for the amendment adopted today, including physicians. Now, many physicians will fall outside of the other parameters in this bill. However, you know, our position all along the way has been our frontline healthcare workers should be recognized for the work they have done. And that certainly includes physicians. And this new language will certainly take in quite a few physician residents, probably family practice physicians who don't meet those income thresholds, but who were absolutely working with COVID positive patients every day. So I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you to that. Unfortunately, there are still significant problems with the bill. And items, as Leader Doubt pointed out, that frankly were never agreed upon and will never be agreed upon. This is theater, it's political theater, and it's unfortunate. But I want to lay out why exactly this bill is so bad and really should not be supported today, which is really unfortunate. Because, you know, we started out this frontline worker group this summer, and we were all sort of, I think we were all looking forward to the opportunity. I mean, it's not often that we have a chance to come together with a sum of money and figure out, okay, great. How do we just get to distribute this to the people who sacrificed, took risk and took care of Minnesotans during the pandemic. So it's unfortunate that we've come to this place. But the first thing I want to point out is under the eligibility, and this has been mentioned by a couple of my colleagues, but for some reason, the language in the bill requires an employee to have worked only 120 hours. This amounts to about 3 weeks out of 67. And if the purpose of this bill is to reward frontline workers, this should be focused on those people who worked through the pandemic. That's the whole point of this bill. That's the whole point of this appropriation, is to support workers, those who were assuming risk and going to work throughout the pandemic. As far as the eligibility goes, the commissioners are required. It says they must verify applicant eligibility. But then it says, but if they can't do it in a timely fashion, well, then they just don't have to verify eligibility. So I don't even know why this is in the bill. I mean, you may as well just say that we do not have to verify applicant eligibility. They can just apply and get it, because that is the effect of this language, that there is no verification of eligibility. Some stuff I will come back to. The notice requirement, and I mentioned this before, the notice requirement is for employers, and no later than 15 days after the application period opens, they are required to post, provide notice of the application opportunity for their employees. The problem is, there is no direction to Dolly on when they have to give that instruction to employers. The entire burden here is on employers, and while Representative Frazier minimized the risk to employers, language matters. And the language of the bill, the section of statute this references, allows for fines of up to $1,000 per employee. And so if that is not your intention, then that should not be in the bill. Because right now, the very plain language of the bill allows employers to be fined at a rate of $1,000 per employee. Representative Drazkowski mentioned the $1 billion price tag. The millions of dollars for administration are actually on top of that. They don't come out of the billion. It's actually millions of dollars on top of that, on top of the billion. I want to address quickly, well, actually I want to address relatively detailed because I think it matters. The amendment that was adopted, the Frazier amendment that was adopted, also it made an attempt to clean up some of the procurement language. And I appreciate the attempt. This is something that I brought up in committee as something that's very concerning. Procurement, we have laws about the procurement process in the state of Minnesota for a reason. And that reason is to protect taxpayers. And as it turns out, there are other reasons that I will go through here. There are the problem is the new language still allows for pretty significant exemptions, and there's sort of 3 categories of those exemptions. The first one is related to encumbering funds. Now I know everyone's eyes are glazing over as we mention things like encumbering funds, but it matters. It matters because what it says is that because of this exemption, agencies are no longer required to encumber these funds before these contracts can be executed. And the problem with that, this is actually according to Minnesota House Research. They say the general purpose of the allotment and encumbrance system is to help track agency spending. The bottom line is that this is about accountability and tracking. And we have now removed that requirement. In addition to that, this is also a piece that we have now removed. This is exempted. It says, if an employee knowingly incurs an obligation or authorizes or makes an expenditure in violation of this chapter or takes part in the violation is just cause for the employee's removal. This is so serious that violating this is cause for someone to be fired from their job. And we are now exempting that in this bill. The others, I think, are even more alarming and egregious. Let's see here. Another category is regards to ethics. We are now exempting the ethical practices and conflict of interest from procurement when it comes to this bill. And of course, the agencies are allowed to hire third-party vendors, but now they no longer have to work within the ethical practices and conflict of interest statute under procurement. So what this means is that, well, let's say it this way. In fact, I'm going to read this from statute. It says, an employee making a good faith report if they have seen behavior that is not ethical, that is not following the ethical standards, an employee making a good faith report under this section is covered under section 181.932, prohibiting the employer from discriminating against the employee. So by exempting this portion of statute, what this means is that if an employee finds unethical actions and reports them, they are no longer protected as a whistleblower. There is no protection here for a whistleblower who finds unethical practices under this statute. And finally, and perhaps most alarming, the third sort of exemption category, it applies only to grants. And there is only one grant in this language. The grant in this language is for $756,000 to go very specifically to the Minnesota Training Partnership. To be clear, the Minnesota Training Partnership is started by and founded by a major DFL campaign donor, which is already alarming. But in addition to that, the grant, this is what is now exempted by exempting this procurement. Typically what happens is a grant agreement made by an executive agency must include an audit clause that provides that books, records, documents, and accounting procedures and practices of the grantee or other parties that are relevant to the grant or transaction, that would imply those who receive the grants from the grantee, however that money is further disseminated, are subject to examination by the granting agency and either the legislative auditor or the state auditor. We are exempting this grant program from any oversight. Why in the world are we including this? Not only that, Representative Scott had an amendment to fix this and to specifically require an OLA audit, and the majority party voted it down. This specifically exempts this grant program. It exempts the Minnesota Training Partnership from any oversight. From any oversight. As Leader Doubt said, this bill is about politics. This bill is not about doing the right thing. It is not about getting money to the people who deserve it. It's not about getting to the money to the people who worked through this pandemic, who sacrificed through this pandemic, who assumed real risk during this pandemic, particularly those frontline healthcare workers, who knew every day it was not a question mark. When they left their homes every day, they did not think, well, COVID is out there, I could be exposed to it. No, they left their home every day knowing that they would be exposed to it. There was no question. They knew the risk they were assuming, and they still did it. And yet, this bill is not going to help them. This bill is going to do nothing. This bill is politics. This bill is theater. This bill is a giveaway to a major special interest DFL donor. There is no reason to vote for this bill today, but there are a heck of a lot of reasons to vote no.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is a contorted, twisted pretzel of an argument for depriving workers across Minnesota who have stood up for all of us, done the work for all of us, been there for all of us, from a $1,500 payment. We received $2.83 billion from the federal government, the American Rescue Plan, to provide funds for long-term and short-term pandemic relief. A third of the states have used a portion of those federal funds to provide workers with incentive pay, bonus pay, hero pay, whatever you want to call it. A third of the states have done it, and we have not. At the end of last session, the Speaker, through negotiations and over the objections of the Republican leadership in the Senate, created a $250 million commitment from both parties to pay out money. The how I spent my summer vacation story I have to share this session is I spent it with Representative New Brindley and Representative Frazier and Senator Murphy and Senator Housley, and we heard dozens and dozens and dozens of stories from workers about their experience during the pandemic. It wasn't just nurses, it wasn't just firefighters, it wasn't just police officers, it was transit workers, grocery store workers, meat packers. They were workers all across Minnesota who were there for us. The consistent theme we heard from all of the workers who came was, don't exclude workers who were there. People who showed up in person, people who were exposed to the coronavirus, people who contracted the coronavirus, who continued to be the people showing up and doing the work, should be included. The outcome of that summer of work on the Frontline Pay Worker Group was a disagreement. Republicans did not want to include all of those workers, and Democrats did. Rather than creating a two-tier system or a small payment amount, this bill represents a $1,500 payment for all of those workers, and we have rushed it through under Representative Frazier's leadership to get this bill to the floor as fast as possible. Just as fast in comparison to the complexity of the bill as we got the workers' comp extension to the floor. We care about the workers of this state. We care about people who are working in long-term and home care, health care, emergency responders, public health, social service, and regulatory workers, people who work in courts and corrections, childcare, public schools, including charter schools, state schools, and higher education, food service, including food service production, processing, preparation, and delivery, retail, temporary shelters, building services, janitorial and security, public transit, air and ground transportation, manufacturing, and any number of other types of occupations that had people showing up. You all have thousands of people in your districts who would benefit from this bill. We have heard nothing but excuses as to why we shouldn't pass it. The worst I've heard is that somehow giving more workers more money is going to make the economy worse. Somehow, if they have more money in their pocket to spend, they won't be able to afford to spend as much money on goods and services in the economy. that somehow workers having money is a form of inflation. That's really special. Take a look at the folks we have here from who work in meat packing. Many of them work in Worthington. Many of them work for a company called JBS. It has about a 20% total global market share of meat packing. It is the world's largest meat producer. Its profits during the pandemic doubled from $3 billion to $7.5 billion, while meat prices, and specifically pork prices, have gone up 14%. What is JBS's record? They have $80,000 in OSHA fines because of 2 deaths in their facilities in Minnesota. They have had 5 other COVID violations. Workers' comp benefits have been available for 0 workers. They've had outbreaks, they have been sick, and they've had 0 successful workers' comp claims because the bill that we passed 2 years ago to extend the workers' comp presumption did not include them over the objection of the Chamber of Commerce. They've had nothing. This is not a Minnesota company. This is a global company whose U.S. headquarters is in Greeley, Colorado. They have exploited the workers. They have been bringing home windfall profits. They have been raising prices, and they are causing inflation in the meat industry, not the workers who need these checks. We've also heard about the urgency of passing the UI bill. Guess how much JBS Foods will get every year if we pass your version of that bill? $1 million a year. We are going to tax your grocery store workers. We are going to tax your police officers, your firefighters. We're going to tax your healthcare workers in order to give this exploitive company $1 million a year in bailout money in the UI fund. That's your plan. We have supported workers. We have supported small businesses. We have supported families all through the pandemic. At our best, that has been bipartisan work. We have also excluded benefits from taxation. We've excluded PPP loans and grants from taxation. There are people in this room who have received those benefits. We have helped small business. We have provided the charity to the small business that we just talked about here on the floor. We're talking about $1,500 for a worker, not $5,800 for a shoe store or $6,250 for a photography studio. These workers need this money. We need to pass this bill right now. If you're voting no, you are voting against the very people in your district who have kept you safe, kept your family safe, kept our economy going for the last 2 years, and that is a completely unacceptable vote. The only good vote today is a green vote. Pass this bill, get this done, and do something positive for our workers.
The member from Hennepin, the author of the bill, Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to drop the mic for Representative Majority Winkler. I don't know if you can top that. Thank you for that. I'll say this. I understand that we all have a job to do on this side of the aisle and on that side of the aisle. But when we take for granted the work of our essential workers and what they've done to move this state forward, we have to come together on that. I know I might not get any yes votes on that side, but I know you've got thousands of constituents in your district that want this bill to become law. And it can become law because you can help with that. You can talk to your GOP colleagues in the Senate. You can urge them to move this forward. You can do that. The only thing that stands in the way of the workers that are here in the gallery that came here to see this bill passed tonight and this coming into law is inaction by other legislators. That is the only thing that stands in the way. And if you vote no, that is an inaction. I began carrying this bill over a year ago. I'm not carrying this bill because I believe it's going to win me another election certificate. I don't carry any bill for that reason. I carry bills because I believe they can make the lives of Minnesotans better. And I will always carry bills for that purpose and that purpose only. And that bill is for this purpose. So for all the workers that are here, we're with you. We'll continue to be with you. We'll continue to fight for you. And we'll do our part. I hope my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will do their part. I urge a yes vote.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members voting remotely, please vote. Will the chief clerk please call the names of the members who've not yet voted?
Backer.
Backer votes no.
Backer, no.
Bo, no.
Bo, no. Christensen.
Christensen, aye.
Christensen, aye. Franzen.
Franzen votes.
Franzen.
Franzen votes. Franzen is no.
Franzen, no. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, no.
Gruenhagen, no. Hassan.
Hassan, aye.
Hassan, aye. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Hornstein.
Hornstein, aye.
Hornstein, aye. Mariani.
Mariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. Mecklin.
Mecklin, no.
Mecklin, no. Moran.
Aye.
Moran, aye. Pearson.
No.
Pearson, no. Sandsted.
Sandsted, aye.
Sandsted, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 71 ayes and 61 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there's no objection, we will take action on those motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail.
Hewitt moves that House File Number 2919 be recalled from the Committee on Commerce, Finance, and Policy and be re-referred to the Committee on State Government, Finance, and Elections.
The member from Dakota, Representative Hewitt, to your motion.
Madam Speaker, that is my motion. I have spoken with both chairs, and they are both in agreement on this. Thank you.
It's customary to state what the bill is about.
Oh, I'm sorry. This trying to get us going. Anyways, Madam Speaker, this is a bill that that's about accountancy, and it's to do some small language changes on their regulation.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. Announcements. Announcements. The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Madam Speaker, I have a point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
Madam Speaker, tonight I'm holding the people of Ukraine very close, as I think all of us are, in this moment of tragedy and crisis. I have a personal connection to the country through my mother of blessed memory. She grew up in Lvov, which at that time was in Poland. Now the city is Lviv in Ukraine. I had the opportunity to visit there several years ago and met incredible people. And I'm thinking about them tonight. My mother was there on September 1st, 1939, when the Nazis bombed the city. And she had to go to a shelter where her family had to live for several days. So when bombs are falling on Ukraine, and Ukrainians are scurrying to shelters and are in deep worry and concern and crisis, I feel a personal connection. Members, this is a very, very important moment in history. And I think all of us in Minnesota
should stand in solidarity with the people of Ukraine. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our hearts must be with the people of Ukraine and all Ukrainian Minnesotans. I personally have the honor to represent many Ukrainian Minnesotans, and I stand with them and invite you to join me. I urge the nations of the world to work for peace, and I want to ask the body for a moment of silence for us to pray and think of peace.
Members, please rise for a moment of silence for the people of Ukraine. Announcements. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. Monday, February 28th, Gesundheit 2022.
Representative Winkler moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. Monday, February 28th, 2022. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Winkler moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until 3:30 p.m. Monday, February 28th, 2022.